5 questions that Christians commonly have about Halloween. This question, to me, centers around our understanding of celebration, because there is a difference between celebration and participation. If we are celebrating something, we want to make sure that whatever we are celebrating, whatever we are, lifting high, is something that's honorable to God. So if your kids are going out, taking part in the neighborhood and trick-or-treating and getting candy from neighbors, saying hi, dressed up in cute things, and building a relationship in that way. If you have people coming over to your house and you're sharing food and you're praying with one another and these kind of things, what you are celebrating is important. Participation in things does not always mean that we are blemished. And I think that's really at the heart of this is it okay for Christians to celebrate Halloween? It depends on what that is, which kind of leads to our question number 4. Does Halloween have pagan roots? This is really what this "can we celebrate Halloween" stems from. This question, like, can we celebrate Halloween, and is it going to damage us, and like all of these kind of things. So 2,000 years ago, the Celtic people had a festival that was basically the passing from the harvest season to the winter season. So the harvest season was kind of the end of this life cycle, and the winter season was going into the cold and what they would associate with death. So they put on masks, they set bonfires to try to scare the death spirits away. In the 4th century, though, the church got involved, and they started celebrating on October 31st a Martyrs' Day, or people who had been martyred for the faith. And by the 7th century, the November 1st was called All Hallows' Day, or All Saints' Day, right? So the 31st then became All Hallows' Eve, which in decades and centuries and changes of language and all whatnot became Halloween. So Halloween is actually has Christian roots in the name of the title, which most people wouldn't associate with Halloween. The reality is that many of our holidays, whether it be Christmas or Easter, which are very securely Christian in our culture, have pagan roots. Because the whole idea of a feast day is that we as a culture get together, we have a feast, that this is a holy day, that we are putting work aside and that we are celebrating something. And there's nothing more Christian than going in and reforming what's going on. And that takes us to question number 3. A lot of churches try to rebrand Halloween, which again, since Halloween is actually kind of in a Christian history as far as the name comes from, you don't really need to, but I understand why churches want to at times. Harvest festivals are given by churches all the time. Reformation Day is October 31st, so this is the day that Martin Luther actually went and pounded his theses onto the door of one of the chapels. I don't recall right off the top of my head which one it was, but this is a very important day in the Reformation. And there is nothing more Christian than reforming things to be, like kind of take that territory back for Christ, or take that area back for Christ. If we go in as a counselor and are helping someone to counsel them through a life situation, we are retaking that area of their life and bringing it in alignment with the gospel, bringing it in alignment with the teaching of Christ. So we're reforming that area of their life. And we do this with holidays. We've done it with Christmas. We've done it with Easter. We can still do this with Halloween. Anything can be refocused to Christ. So this is, 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, whether you eat or drink, do all things to the glory of God. So the real question here is not, should you pass out candy or should you attend a church event? Do what you want to do. You are free to choose either one. But whichever you choose, do it to the glory of God. Your question really shouldn't be, am I allowed to do this? Is this permissible or is this permissible? But the question that would really be beneficial in our heart is, how am I going to do the things that I have been given a desire to the glory of God? Because if we find ourselves being able to say, like, I can give out candy at my house to the glory of God. I can get out the biggest candy bars that every kid is going to remember and love and attach a gospel tract to those, or something that they can, engage with. Man, I'm going to be the most popular guy in the neighborhood. I've now redeemed passing out candy at my house for the glory of God. In the same way, I can invite people to a church event and have them exposed to the gospel there, or invite neighbor families to come with us. So there's not a right or wrong here as a Christian. We are free to do what we want. We're not under some system where we have to figure out is this the thing I can do, or is this thing I can do? Like, God has made these things pretty clear. There are things that if we participate in them, it could lead to damaging things, right? Inappropriate sexual relationships, drunkenness. There are things that when we participate in it, the participation in itself is what makes it evil. Kids dressing up, eating candy, spending time in your neighborhood, those are not those things, nor obviously is going to church. That kind of leads us to our second question that we want to discuss. This one gets a little bit weird sometimes, because anytime we start talking about the demonic, anytime we start talking about the unseen, the spiritual, it gets a little bit subjective. Now, the Bible has told us a lot about the spiritual, and the truth is that demons are out there. And when Paul talks about spiritual warfare, he is talking about it to the church. So demons do make some sort of attacks, oppression. They gain footholds or strongholds, as the Bible says, in the lives of Christians. This doesn't mean that they're possessed. It doesn't mean that they're owned. It just means that there is a battle going on, and we need to be aware of that. Now, this, taking part, can a demon gain power or influence from celebrating or taking part in Halloween? The key is, what are we opening ourselves up to, right? So if we are celebrating the things of Satan, the things of the spirit of this world, if we're, you go to Halloween parties and stuff right now, people are worried about the influence of the demonic in Halloween, but really the demonic part of Halloween that is most prevalent is the over-sexualization of children and adults. Because Halloween costumes have really become more like sexualized versions of every costume. And we got to be careful for that. Like, if we're celebrating by being like the world and being overly sexualized and embracing, our sexuality as our identity, then clearly we're giving the enemy a stronghold. We're giving the enemy territory, because our mind is not aligning with the values of God. So this question goes a little bit deeper, and can a demon gain power or influence from celebrating, from us celebrating something? Yes, they can. They can gain power or influence in our lives if we're celebrating the things that they embrace, that the lies that they're feeding us. But if I walk through a doorway, it doesn't mean that suddenly I have given permission for a demon to influence me or to be a part of my life. There's an aspect of this where, like, we will always receive external attacks, right? These fiery darts that come into us. And, the enemy may try to throw a thought our way, or throw a feeling, or push, somebody else to do something. I mean, those kind of things can happen. But that's not power over you. That's just attack, because we're in a war zone. Probably the most important question that people ask is question number 1. This is actually a place where I think is if there's anything that a Christian needs to consider, this is the question. With my kids, my rule is, if we're dressing up as something, that means that we are imitating that thing. We're having fun with it. And, not in a way that an actor might imitate, a serial killer on screen because there's a character in that film. This is much more in a way where it's like, this is fun. This is, especially for a kid, like, they want to dress up as things that they admire or enjoy or like. And we want to encourage the desires of our children's hearts to pursue things that are lovely and good, right? I think about Philippians, right? Whatever's good, whatever's pure, whatever's holy, think on these things. And that's what we need to tell our kids when it comes to picking costumes. Having a costume, if you choose to go that way, which again, there's no right or wrong answer. If you have a past with the occult, I completely understand that Halloween would give you the creeps, and that you would have strong convictions against that. We know people who are of that, and those are strong convictions. And just as Romans 14 says, like, the weaker brother needs to be allowed to live into their convictions. And this is not weaker in some kind of less valuable confinement that you're, weaker and not strong, but that in this area you have a stronger conviction, which makes you the weaker brother. And that's a whole, another discussion on Romans 14, which is a great passage to dig into, especially in our day and age. But for our kids, we want to encourage them to pursue whatever is good, whatever is holy, whatever is righteous, whatever is of God. There are so many fun Halloween costumes that kids can embrace and dig into. I think it's a great exercise to see what your kid wants to dress up for as Halloween will tell you what is the value in their heart. And then you as a parent can respond to that and redirect as necessary or affirm where appropriate. So I can't tell you what you can dress your kids up for Halloween, but those would be the principles that I use for my kids, and I think they're pretty biblical and founded. These questions, all of these questions, make me think about Romans 14. Romans 14 is a great passage about Christian liberty. And as we approach questions like this, we need to understand that God has not given us an exhaustive list of this is what you're allowed to do and this is what you're not allowed to do. He has given us moral foundations for what we are allowed to do and what we're not. And we need to allow the Holy Spirit to apply in our life what is the best application of this moral foundation to this specific situation. And the truth is that sometimes, just as in Romans 14, when it's talking about dietary conditions and when we are going to worship on a particular day of the week, there's not a more holy or less holy answer, but there's actually a diversity that is allowed so that more people are reached through the diversity of the church, meeting people where they're at. And this is the beauty of Christ, is that Christ does not come down as a one size fits all. He comes down as a one size that meets all. Because Jesus is the perfect, but he comes to people where they're at, and he meets them where they're at. Just as Paul says, I will be all things to all people. Jesus is where he embraced and learned that foundational belief from, so that we should be all things to all people so that they can be reached for the gospel. So as you celebrate Halloween, as you think about these questions, do it for the glory of God. As you don't celebrate Halloween and you wrestle through these questions, do that for the glory of God. Not that we would be better than people, but that God would receive glory in no matter what we do, and that you guys would be salt and light to the world around you.